I'm Heather Smith and welcome to Cloud Stories, a podcast exploring the accounting and the business apps community. Today, I'm speaking with Alex Ghiculescu, co-founder of both Tanda and Workforce.com. Alex is known for blogging and has a Substack newsletter where he shares stories from his 10 plus years of building Tanda. Additionally, through Keen Strategies, Alex invests in B2B SaaS companies offering early stage investments alongside technical and operational experience. In 2012, he received a distinction Bachelor of Business and Information Technology and Software Engineering from QUT. Tanda is an Australian payroll, rostering and HR software designed for businesses that employ hourly workers. The company is headquartered in Brisbane, Australia, and also operates internationally as Workforce.com. Tanda offers an all-in-one solution that includes time and attendance, workforce scheduling, payroll integration, and reporting tools. In case you'd not realised it, Tanda stands for Time and Attendance. Before I hand over to the interview, I encourage you to join the Xero Mastermind group on Facebook for advanced conversations around the ecosystem. Subscribe to the informative Accounting Apps newsletter, which you can find at heathersmithau.com, and connect with me, Heather Smith, on LinkedIn, and also subscribe to the podcast. Hello, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Cloud Stories podcast. I'm really excited to have you here. And I think the big question that our audience has is, have you ever figured out how many Tanda socks your team has given away at conferences?
Oh, no, probably thousands. It must be thousands.
I think it's probably tens of thousands.
It's all I wear. So if it's, I'm guessing I'm not the only one like that.
I have seen so many bags of those socks over the years. So they are well-worn socks by the industry. So thanks for keeping all of those tootsies warm.
I mean, if that's all we contribute to the industry, then I guess that's not so good, but they help.
It's a little help, isn't it? So can you initially share with our listeners who are accountants, bookkeepers, and other people working in their ecosystem, what Tanda does?
Yeah, so Tanda is a workforce management platform. So we do timesheets, rostering, leave management, and we've been doing that for over 10 years for places where people are paid by the hour, so casual workplaces, shift and hourly workplaces. As of this year, we're also a payroll product. So we launched Tanda Payroll a few months ago. That's been going really, really well. So now we kind of do sort of have an all-in-one system for shift and hourly workforces from clocking in right through to getting paid. And we're also doing HR and operations and a bunch of other stuff that these businesses need as well.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but last year I went diving on the Great Barrier Reef with your co-founder Tasman.
Oh, I didn't know that. He's from far north Queensland, so
and they love him up in far north Queensland.
Yeah.
So he gave a talk talking about how he travelled from far north Queensland to Brisbane barefoot, and he arrived, I think it was at QUT. Would that be right? Where he met you and the other Tanda co-founders. So I'm wondering if you can share the story of the early days of Tanda.
Well, I was wearing shoes.
That's really what we wanted to know. It's probably why you're giving away all those socks for Tasman. I was
going to say, hence the socks thing. But yeah, we were at QT studying together, and we kind of, when Taz, Jake, Josh and I were living together, and we ended up sort of helping out with the management of the student bar that's based on campus. It's kind of a quirky thing where the bars and other businesses on campus are run by students. So we were doing that, and we found that the bar on a university campus in Brisbane was losing money, which we thought was odd and shouldn't be possible, despite our best efforts. And so we kind of decided we would try to do something like that, and we dug into the problem and found that a big part of the profitability problems came from poor attendance, poor rostering management, just generally their guess the stuff that I do full time now wasn't being done very well there. And we went out to market, couldn't find any systems we liked. And we were kind of uni students, so we were pretty stingy, but also we had this feeling that we could just do anything better ourselves, which I think worked out well. And the timing was good. We launched just as a lot of the systems that we got quotes for were a time clock that you need an IT department for, and it's a fingerprint scanner, and it costs $50,000. And we kind of launched just in time for the iPad, and everyone does clocking in and out on their iPads. Obviously, we timed the cloud software movement pretty well, and the rise of Xero and stuff like that. So we timed it well, such that it was we built what a next generation product for that should look like. But yeah, the early days we just started off trying to make this bar not with so much money.
It is interesting how back in the day, because Tanda's it's been almost 12 years since you founded it. Back in the day, solutions were costing $50,000. An accounting solution back probably 20 years ago was costing $50,000. So it's very exciting that people are able to build these solutions that come out at a price point that smaller businesses can actually afford and digest.
Yeah, totally.
So it's written. In the early days, Tanda honed their inside sales skills and started closing more inbound leads quickly. So I'm not sure if that's something that you're across, but I'm wondering if you know what strategies Tanda used to close inbound leads quickly.
I'm wondering where you're getting that from. I think in the early days, our main sales strategy was really just to be very willing to build new features really quickly, which I think is probably not a very scalable sales strategy. But it was just the four of us, and we had a pretty close feedback loop between doing a demo of the product and hearing what parts were missing through to me building it, kind of same day some of the time. So we went to we went from nothing to a functional and time and attendance product that did sort of everything that you needed quite quickly in just a few years. And I don't know if there was any. I wouldn't say we were particularly good at sales operations. I mean, we're kind of getting good at that now, but I guess our tactic of listening to customers and building what they asked for was pretty effective, and it's easy to overcomplicate that.
It is so, it's funny because you say, we were listening to customers, and I speak to so many apps in the ecosystem, and they've built something without talking to customers. They're running something, they're selling something without talking to customers. And it's just like the apps that listen, are so much more attractive to work with, because you know that if they're not putting functionality in, they're listening to you about why it's not there. That simple process of listening is important, and I validate it.
It helped because we were building it for ourselves on day one, like when we knew what the bar needed. It wasn't very much, but we built that. But it gets a lot harder because most of our employees don't use Tanda. They don't make rosters in Tanda every day, or they clock in and out, but it's kind of a notional thing because they're all salaried. So there's been a challenge as we have grown to continue to be good at listening, even when it's like we don't have such an obvious understanding of what the problems are. But we actually do need to go and have other people explain it to us, and we can't just go and be like, what do we need next ourselves? But it's a pretty good thing to keep being good at.
Absolutely. Completely agree. So what does it mean to you to see, after almost 12 years, to see Tanda light up the Brisbane skyline?
Yeah, so the first time I saw it, so for those who don't live in Brisbane, you should make a pilgrimage up and visit Tanda Tower. I was living overseas, actually. I moved to the US to help launch our US business for a few years. And the first time I saw the name on the building, I guess, was in April last year, when I was back for a visit after COVID. And I didn't think that it would be emotional, but then I was actually a bit surprised by how cool it was. These days I walk past it every day, so it's just it's another building with a name on it. But And honestly, and I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't, like, I wouldn't say that having a name on a building helps our customers in any way, but it is cool. And, you know, I think it probably helps with recruitment a little bit. It makes people feel like they're proud of where they work. They can explain to their parents what they do in a very abstract sort of way.
Absolutely.
You know, if your kids work for a company with a name on the building, it's probably a good place to work. So
I was really proud of Tanda and the Tanda team when I did see the building. So I'm glad that it made you happy.
It did. Probably more than I expected. I'm not very. I didn't expect to get attached to it. I don't tend to like get very sentimental about things, but I guess I found my line.
My father founded a school, and they made a bust, like a gargoyle head, and it's placed on top of the tower. So
that's cool.
It's very weird, but it's
cool, always there.
But you could have the 4 founders' heads up on the tower.
No, definitely not.
That is just
definitely a bridge too far.
A bridge. Oh, we can put it on the bridge then. Brisbane's building a lot of bridges. Brisbane does seem to be a bridge city. We've jumped around a bit. You have talked to me about software. That I assume is the area sort of you spend a lot of time. You spent a decade building software. What are some of the things that you've learned during this time?
I mean, I started when I was in uni, so I guess I've learned everything during this.
What language were you using at university?
At university, I was teaching Python. Actually, that was how I was funding. While we were starting out, we got other jobs to keep ourselves alive while we did this, and so I was teaching university students how to, like, their intro to coding, which is kind of funny because it was a course I'd done like 2 years earlier, and before that I hadn't written any code. So I was really like just skating ahead of the students and just keeping in front of them. These days I mostly work in Ruby. But to your question about what we've learned, I think obviously listening to customers is very, very important. The other big thing I think has become obvious, and it feels weird to say now that we've kind of been around for a little while, but I think that there is like an idea in not amongst programmers necessarily, but amongst people that are adjacent to software, like product managers and consultants and so on. There's an idea that like everyone builds software at the same speed. And so the most important thing you can do is to prioritize really well. Will we do this thing or that thing? And the order that you do things in really, really matters. And saying no to things really matters. And I think that's true to an extent. But I think the biggest thing I've learned is that it is really, really practical to do things 10, 100 times faster than other companies or than other people. And kind of the nature of software, it lends itself to significant differences in speed. And when we've been able to internalize that and actually like lead into that and work more quickly and more productively than the competition, that's much more effective than prioritizing well, like than picking the right thing to work on. So I think something that surprised me is I didn't really understand the impact that speed can have because it's very counterintuitive, like it's very exponential. And as I've gotten better at understanding that, it really influences a lot of other decisions that we make and how we sort of think about what we should focus on, what we can do next and stuff like that. That's been it sounds like, I mean, in every other facet of life, it's reasonable to say that people do things with different levels of ability or different. Not everyone's equally good at running or equally good at tennis or whatever. But for some reason in the software world, it seems like it kind of, everyone agrees in theory, but the idea, in the practical implications of the idea don't really happen very often. So how do you write software quickly? Well, I think that's actually a really good question because I find it very hard to answer, which probably is what leads to why it's difficult to put into practice. I think a large part comes from organizational structure. And I think mostly in terms of it comes from not having distractions. So when you're working by yourself, it's very easy to have no distractions because there's no one to talk to. It's pretty lonely, but at least you're never distracted.
You're not working in my head because there's a lot of people talking in my head all the time.
Well, yeah, maybe that's yet to come. But so not having distractions that I guess you can't control. And then that needs to be balanced out with having a very clear idea of what you need to build. And I think what's really difficult is finding the balance between those two things, because if you don't know exactly what you need to build, then you probably need to ask someone to explain it to you. But then that's a distraction, and then maybe they're not available right now, or maybe they just explain it wrong or whatever, and suddenly it spirals out of control. But conversely, if you have no distractions and then you just build something that doesn't work at all because you built the wrong thing, then also ultimately it's not very effective. So I think where we've been successful is where we have managed to really strike the balance between those two things. And I think I actually really, really like that question, because I've been thinking a lot about we're good at moving quickly. What does that mean? Question a lot. And I think, okay, well, how do you actually, what makes you be able to move quickly? I think is a really interesting question that obviously I have a very bad answer for. So I think I need to think more about that.
So is it staff you employ? Is it the tools that you're using? Is it the coding? Because what you've seemed to have said is it's clear focus and clear direction.
Which is a very generic answer. I think I'll tell you what's
perfectly fine.
I'll tell you what it's not. I think it's not inherently the people. And so what I mean by that is a lot of the hiring that we've done over the years, particularly in the earlier days, was university graduates. It was our friends, and then it was other uni students. And frankly, that's because it was cheap. When we didn't really have that many customers, we couldn't afford to hire senior developers with experience. But the prevailing wisdom in the industry is when you're scaling a company up, you need to hire seniors who've done it before. And we were just we can't do that. So let's just get these random 21-year-olds and tell them to go build this thing and check it really thoroughly afterwards. But that seemed to work way better than anyone expected it would. And I don't think that we did it so many times and it works well so many times. I don't think it was a fluke. Obviously, there's things that 40-year-olds understand that 21-year-olds don't about what the software should do, because they have different life experience, or sometimes they're a bit easier to work with on an emotional level. But in terms of ability to write code, we found a way. So I think that, and this isn't to say that there's no value at all in more experienced hires, because of course there is. But I think it would be easy to convince yourselves that if you just hire the most experienced people, then that's all you need to do. And we found that we were able to get very, very far with just hiring very, very inexperienced people who were enthusiastic. All we needed to do was be very, very clear about what was to be done, and then not talk to them. And that's and those parts I think work well with anyone. I think tooling makes an impact, programming language of choice and frameworks and stuff like that. But I think that I think the impact of that also gets overstated. I don't subscribe to the school of thought that there is an objective best tool or best language or anything for any specific job. I do subscribe to the school of thought that the best tool is the one you know best. So, but then that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy where the more time you spend in it, the better it becomes. So, but that's distinct from this is objectively the best, or everyone should use this. So, I guess that helps, but it's it helps because I don't know. I don't think it helps because there's an objectively correct answer. I'm thinking as I'm talking through here, so
that's
making sense.
That's okay. As someone who has visited your office very many times over the last decade, I can attest to there is a very, very young workforce, and I feel very, very old.
I'm starting to feel old there. That's kind of a worry. And how am I? I'm 31. I don't even know how old I am anymore. I'm definitely in the older 50% now. What's it is? odd.
Absolutely. So you spent 5 years in Colorado, USA. So why did you go there? And what was your experience like there?
So I was actually in Chicago for most of it.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. We're in Colorado most recently. So we bought a company that was based in Chicago called workforce.com. And we used that as like an entry point into the US market. And so if you look up Tanda in America, we trade there as workforce.com. And then I was in Chicago working on that and trying to build up in the US, and spent the better part of 5 years in the States, and which was really, it was an awesome adventure, and we learned a lot and saw a different part of the world. I got married while we were there. I had my first kid while we were there. So it was a pretty exciting time. It was a great adventure all around. And yeah, we moved back to Brisbane April this year. So about almost 6 months ago now.
So you went through the US medical system. We probably need a whole episode on navigating that.
Yeah, well, if anyone wants tips on how to birth a baby in Chicago, I'm the man to talk to. But actually, that part actually went really, really well. Like, we couldn't have been happier with that experience, to the extent where it's like, oh, would we go back just for that? Which we won't. But
no.
I think we won't. But I guess it's not up to me, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, it is an interesting place when you travel, but then you have to go through medical experiences. I had a friend who gave birth in France, and they don't let you go near the baby for 5 days, and she was not aware of this.
Yeah, that's not good.
It was just this.
Whether or not it's a good system, not knowing that's coming is pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, you don't ask, are you going to take the baby away from me for 5 days?
No, you really.
I'm not sure whether that's still happening, but that was probably
the place. To give an idea of the options, at the place we went, we were back home 4 hours later.
Oh my goodness!
As in by choice, they said like, "You guys aren't sick. Do you want to go home?" I'm like, "Yeah, sounds great." So it's kind of the other extreme, I guess, but it worked really well for us.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. What did you so you're in Chicago and you're in Colorado, and they're two really big cities. What did you learn from operating the business there that you sort of, as a piece of advice you'd give to someone else trying to do that?
Well, a lot. To someone who's trying to go from Australia to the US,
contemplating it, everyone's always it's this big shiny adventure to go over there, isn't it, for people?
Yeah. So my first advice would be, I think the first thing I say to people now is don't do it. And it's kind of like if you'll do it anyway, it's probably a good sign sort of thing. But I think that one of the things we learned is we also have a pretty decent presence in the UK and in most of mainland Europe these days. And those markets were much, much easier to get started in. And we kind of, like, everyone knows that America is where you should go, but it's kind of, there's plenty of world out there apart from the US. And so that isn't to say that, it's working really well now. We've started to hit our stride, but it was really, really hard. It was really competitive. It was just really different to back home. So I guess the first point is, like, if you're just kind of going because it sounds cool, and if me saying don't go is enough to talk you out of it, that's probably good. But then the second thing is, when you get there, I think it's easy to understate how different things will be. Like, they speak English and they like Australians, and you can kind of just convince yourself that whatever you did in Australia will work there. And I don't mean that, like, the marketing will be the same or whatever, but more so, like, for us, we struggled to just really learn the intricacies of how people think about workforce management and payroll there. And then, like, at one point, if you grow up in Australia, which I did, you get a job in high school at a fish and chip shop or whatever, and you get paid, and they take your tax. You just kind of learn how the system works through osmosis because you're around it, but you never get an education on it. And then if you go to a foreign country, everything's just a little bit different. It's kind of hard to speak the language about things like that, to the point where I was like, maybe we should all get jobs at Subway so that we can just learn exactly how to talk about this stuff. We decided not to do that. But I thought it was a good idea. But there's just like, you kind of need to really rewire your brain a little bit to understand, to the extent where I think if you go into France or something, it's kind of more obvious that you need to learn everything from scratch because it's in a different language. But it's easy to kid yourself that because it's in English, it's all the same. And it's not. But we struggled with that a lot. That was really hard for us to get right.
I worked in Canada and I worked in Singapore, and I found Canada far harder than Singapore. And I think it was that, and I kept saying...
Was it because of that language thing where you
just because they speak English and they look the same as me doesn't mean it's the same, and kept having to remind myself of that because I was just constantly disappointed by things, and I was just like, what's going on here? I don't understand.
Yeah, and it's even hard with Canada where like they have the same queen or king and they use kilometers, and like there's just even less differences. So the ones that are there are more subtle. Yes, it was very, very different. Yes. And it was quite confronting. Were you aware how different their tax and payroll system was state by state before you went to America? In theory, like broadly, yes, but not in I didn't really know exactly what the differences were. We weren't doing payroll in the US until this year. So, but I think I knew there would be differences, but I underestimated the extent of that. But you always underestimate things when you're starting a business. And I think the worst thing you can do is go too far the other direction and be like, we will never go until I'm perfectly ready. Because it's kind of like the metaphor I'm using these days might say more about me is it's kind of like if you wait till you're perfectly ready to have a kid, you'll never have any kids. If you wait till you're perfectly ready to launch in a second country, you'll just or to launch at all, then you'll never launch, and then you won't have a business. So I'm sort of generally reluctant with all this advice because it's kind of you don't want to talk somebody out of doing it entirely by listing all the things that are hard. You got to strike that balance still. Where if you're not naive at all, then you're not going to make it because you're not going to try.
Oh, I think going in wisely with plans and resources makes sense.
Totally.
So what could Australian businesses learn from the way SaaS businesses operated in the US?
That's an interesting question. I think it's weird, right? So I think the most tangible things that we learned specifically over there were around sales and marketing operations. And so there's a lot of expertise in that. There's a lot of people who do training that are like, I'm generally kind of skeptical about people who offer training services and consultants and stuff, but there's like actually legitimately high quality sales training or people there. And they're specialized in SaaS. And really all these people are doing is just taking a book and forcing your team to read it and then forcing you to do the things the book says. But like you need to kick up the arse to actually do that. But you can buy the same book in Australia. But it doesn't, it's like, despite all, I guess my point is all the information is available. There's nothing in the water over there. But I think that there is like a real cultural bias towards much more aggressive, much more competent, and much more thorough sales and marketing, at least in the SaaS world, in the States than I think there is here. I think that's not universally true in Australia. There's segments of the market that are really competitive and segments that are not. But on the whole, I think the maturity of that side of the businesses, I think, surprised me. And the level of, and then what that leads to then is that there's like a huge amount of talent that have done it all before and seen it all before and can be introduced into new companies and do training and whatever. So I think that was kind of, that was a surprise in the depth of that. But then also the surprise was like, one of the things we took from that was like, now we just try to be much better about if there's a book we like, everyone reads the book and we just do the book. And like, it sounds so obvious, but like, it's so easy to be like, we use this playbook, but no one's ever read the playbook. You do 10% of the playbook. If you don't like it, you do the opposite to it. That happens all the time in every part of the business. And as a result, you kind of don't do things as well as you could. So I think that level of like really sticking to methodologies was pretty insightful, was pretty eye-opening for me. Then, then there's the bit that's everyone knows that there's Silicon Valley and there's like the big tech companies and there's social media companies or whatever. And to an extent, I think some of those kinds of companies are hard to start in a country as small as Australia. And I think some of those companies just haven't happened yet because there aren't that many people. And so there's less companies in Australia. And I'm not sure there's anything. I think that those things will come. But in the SaaS world or in our world, I think, yeah, the level of operational sophistication was pretty high, was much higher than it is here. And there's obviously there's a whole other path around access to capital and stuff like that, but we weren't really involved in that space and we didn't take any outside funding. So I can't speak too much to that apart from VCs are always trying to take us to basketball games. If you want free basketball tickets, you should certainly just go to America and tell people you're raising money, and you will just be constantly going to ball games.
Oh, are they?
But apart from that, I have no useful advice on that.
No,
that whole space.
Very interesting. My good friends are in America, and I don't know whether this is the case for everyone, but they went to A&M University in Texas, and they have an Aggie ring, which is quite a big ring on their it's quite a big ring, and they both have one. And they said that it just means if they go to an event and there's another Aggie person there, they instantly are on this networking level with them that's so different. And just like I was like, there's all these secret networks happening that you would go in and just be completely unaware of.
I believe that. So I think that whole thing's super interesting because I'm sure that's true. And it feels like to our Australian sensibilities, it sounds kind of weird, but I could agree. There could be stats. I could be wrong on this. I'm sure someone can find the stats, but the impression I get is as a percentage, many more people in Australia go to university than in America. And so as a result, there's definitely there's a subset of American society that went to college, what college did you go to, blah, 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 blah. But then there's a much bigger segment of society that just thinks all the college people are weirdos. Oh. And in our world, our customers are restaurant managers or people who operate childcare centers or people who operate parking lots. Most of our customers, if they went to college, they didn't go to an Ivy League. They didn't go to Harvard or to A&M. And then they went to a community college, or they just didn't go to college at all and they were just, they operate businesses. So I think for our business, not having a college pedigree kind of helps because you don't get instilled with this incorrect ego that probably does work really well if you're selling banking software to people who went to places that people who did MBAs at Harvard and work in big banks. But yeah, for us, I think staying out of that bubble was kind of good. But it totally is real. There's just it's a pretty big country, even if you ignore the college graduates. Was kind of a bit, and that was a bit different to Australia, I think.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But you probably engage or recruit a lot of people from QUT. There's probably just a smidgen of a preference there, being all QUT gentlemen.
Well, yes, but there's not that many options in Brisbane, unfortunately.
True.
Actually, one more thing I will say on the college thing, because you're probably thinking about it now. We went down the path. We hired a reputable salesperson who went to a prestigious university in Indiana and had a network of other people who went to the university. And you can very easily end up in this stereotypical, I'm calling my network and we're going to do some deals together sort of thing. And it turned out every single deal fell through because ultimately the product still needs to work and the customer still needs to want to buy it. And there's a million other things that need to happen. And just having matching rings doesn't actually go the whole way. So, but it's we fell for it. It's easy to sort of buy into this belief that, the network is so powerful that it replaces everything else. And American salespeople are pretty good at selling that. If you went to college and know about football, you could get pretty far opening doors, but that's pretty different to closing them.
Good point. That's very interesting. So, and I was thinking that we were talking about books before, and you do have a library in your, I think probably maybe it's the cafeteria area of Tanda.
In the Brisbane office, yeah.
Yes, in fact, that I'm thinking of the old library. You've got new offices now, so I'm not sure it's where it is. So you've mentioned to me that the book In the Company of Giants by, oh goodness, Mr. Jaeger and Mr. Raphael, and this book offers a collection of interviews for successful entrepreneurs and business leaders, delves into the mind of these individuals, exploring their strategies, philosophies, and insights on business and leaderships, aiming to provide readers with valuable lessons and inspiration for achieving their success in their own ventures. So you've listed this as one of your favourite books. What is it about your book about this book that you like?
This book, I wish I had brought it in on this call. It's somewhere in the house. So yeah, these guys were like Stanford researchers, and I forget exactly what they were trying to study, but they basically just got funding to just go and interview like the best CEOs in the country. And they defined the best as kind of people in the most fast growing industries and high growth companies, stuff like that. And this was kind of at a time where if you just were researching tech companies, CEOs would just talk to you for a whole day about their work kind of, and be very, very candid. And then they basically just transcribed the interviews and put them all in a book. But the quality of the interviews is so, so good. And the candidness is incredible. I think it's written in probably the late 90s, maybe the mid 90s. I don't know. I was pretty young when it was written. I just think like most business books are someone telling you what to do, and there's a lot of merit to, and that's not bad. That's not bad. I think that's really good when there's a clear path. But I think a lot of entrepreneurship is about sort of navigating a murky path. And it's risky to just, if someone just says, well, here's what I did, here's what you should do. It's like unlikely that exactly the same playbook will work twice. But reading what other people did and sort of understanding their mental model gives you ideas, and you can sort of go and apply that to your own situation. So I really like how it's not prescriptive. It's really the stories. And you can, if you read through them, because they're so well written, it's so deep, you can kind of come up with a lot of your own insights, I think. And in fact, it's a 30-year-old book that's still relevant about technology. Kind of says a lot. Like, I think that's pretty rare.
Well, I think apart from timing, a business person should be successful all the time in what they're applying if they can surface the right business questions and make the right business decisions. So I agree with that. For our listeners, that book again was In the Company of Giants by Jaeger and Raphael. So I imagine you spend a lot of time pivoting to another question. I imagine you spend a lot of time around computers. So what's a piece of hardware and what's an app you use that helps you be productive?
I actually kind of hate computers, to be honest with you. But they're kind of a necessary evil, I guess. I'm going to have the most lame answers ever. Like, my favorite hardware is my AirPods. Because I'm so anti. I don't even use a phone case. I'm like the only person I know who doesn't have a case on their phone. I just find all hardware basically annoying. So as a result, I go through probably more phones than I should. But not too many more. It forces you to not drop them. What apps?
And an app that you like.
How many home screens do you have?
Well, probably about 8 to 10.
I have one.
Oh, wow.
And it's not even full. And
it's not even full.
I think 2 of these are scooter apps. So obviously they're not very important apps.
Oh,
I'm really the worst person to ask these questions.
Well, that could be.
Which is weird because, like, I guess I make apps. Like, I don't think this phone's only a month old. I don't think I have our app installed. I should probably get around to that, shouldn't I? But
that's okay.
I'm going to make a case for this, which is that, like, our customers didn't go into business to be professional roster makers. And so I think, like, me not liking using software in general, I hope translates into us designing software that you can use as quickly as possible and go do anything else. Like, I think that mindset's baked into it. as opposed to you can easily design software that's fun to use and addictive and hooks you in and stuff, but you shouldn't be addicted to rostering. You should be like in and out as quickly as possible. It should be as boring as possible and as functional as possible. And so I think that's my mindset about the apps I use.
Did you ever have more apps on the phone?
I think I once had the full home screen, and then they added the weather widget, I guess, and that's been really good because now I don't have even less apps, but it still looks kind of full.
Well, I'm presuming you listen to Spotify because I can see Spotify there.
Spotify app is I'd say, okay, what apps do I actually use here? I think I don't need the Uber app anymore. I use Spotify a lot. The Tesla app is pretty good. I just got a Tesla. I really like it. So I guess that app's fun.
How does the Tesla app work?
Well, you can lock the car. You can make it make a fart noise.
Oh,
until it gets ready. You can request service if it's broken down. I think
does a Tesla have to be serviced by a Tesla dealer?
Well, I haven't had to do that yet, but I assume so. I'm guessing it's part of the scheme. You can set the aircon from outside, which is kind of like living in Brisbane.
And turn it on. Cool.
That's a very good Queensland feature, I think.
Yes, to get that handlebar cool, so you can actually touch it for the first 5 minutes of the drive. Yeah. So, what is next for you?
Is next to me. We've been doing Tanda Payroll. Been in market paying people for about 5 months now. It's still in beta. We're hoping to, I guess, go live to anyone who wants it by the end of the year. I think that's going to work pretty well.
Sounds like you might have to have a Christmas party for that, the famous Tanda Christmas party.
We will certainly have a huge Christmas party.
To launch the payroll.
That's a great idea. I think that's a good time to go live when everyone's totally ruined at our office. But yeah, I mean, that's been my year, has been working on that. And there's just like learning more about the Australian payroll system. It's really, it's kind of, I mean, as you saw from the apps thing, I'm a very boring person. So the fact that I find making a payroll system interesting maybe isn't that surprising, but it's been interesting sort of taking, I guess, like a fresh spin on how everyone else does it, where there's been a lot of stagnation. I mean, I see you've got the Xero book in the background. The version of Xero.
Say anything bad about it?
I won't. Does it talk about payroll?
No, because it's a global book.
Yeah, gotcha. Not even global payroll. I guess maybe
it talks about global payroll. Yes.
And you wrote it from it was like, it must have been around when we started.
Yes. So this is the 5th edition behind me.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that I'm showcasing it, but yeah. So I update it every 2 years, but all for dummy books are updated every 2 years.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Cause I think when we first were starting was when the first one came out. And what struck me just on that timeline is like, if you had covered Xero payroll when it launched and you had not updated it at all, it would probably still be like basically perfectly fine. The only difference would be it wouldn't cover STP, but that everything else would be like comprehensive. And so I just think there's been so much stagnation in terms of what can be done in this market. And we're kind of having a second crack at it now, knowing a bit more about what is possible. There's obviously a lot more that can be done with banking and stuff like that these days. Superannuation is getting more streamlined. So, and we're coming from a clean slate where we didn't have to do all the STP migration. We haven't acquired a bunch of products and pieced them all together. We're building it all ourselves. And I think we're going to be able to really, and I think we already have probably built the most comprehensive product in the country. And as we sort of cover some of the loose ends, that we've got a lot of loose ends still, obviously, but in a year's time, I think we're going to really be on a good path having the best payroll product out there. And more interestingly to me, I think we're probably the only people who are actually like actively innovating in this space. Everyone else has either sold their company or stopped working on it or has 30 years of technical debt holding them back or something like that. So we're kind of keen to push the limits of what's possible in the exciting world of paying people. But my goal is, I think, like for any business where people clock in and out through using Tanda, there really should be 2 interactions. There's clocking in and then there's someone approving the shift. And I think everything else should be done by software. So we spent a lot of time on the rostering side of doing all the rostering automatically and stuff, and that's pretty hard, but we'll get there. But we've really shifted our focus now towards, if a shift can get approved, payroll should be like, when I say automated, like people still look at their payroll product, but that shouldn't have to happen. HR should be like, all of HR and operations can be automated off the back of that. Banking and money movement can be automated off the back of that. There's more around superannuation and tax, money handling and accounting for those as well that should be automated. And generally, I think we are pretty keen to build all of that. And as you know, I hate software, so it'll be quick to use.
Building it quick so you can get out of it. Oh, thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time to speak with me and the Cloud Story listeners. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Actually, a pretty funny story about you, which I don't know if you remember.
God, about me. It doesn't involve me falling over in your office, does it?
No. It's actually more about me than about you. So I don't know if you remember the first time we talked, but it was, or if I remember correctly. So when we were first starting out, Xero used to, I guess they still do, but Xero does roadshows. They do XeroCon, but they also do like the roadshows that are kind of more consumer focused, and they have ad partners come on and stuff like that. And I think it was 2013, we were about to go to our first Xero roadshows. I think it was going to be Newcastle and then all the way up the coast. And so we downloaded a list from Xero's website of every single bookkeeper and every single accountant. We sort of scraped it from their site. And then we're like, okay, we're going to call everyone and tell them we're coming. So when we get to the roadshow, people will talk to us. Otherwise, will anyone talk to us? Who the fuck knows? So we're like, okay, there's 4 of us. Everyone's got their list. Start calling through the list. And I procrastinated for ages. I hate calling people. I didn't want to do it, but I had my very short list that I just felt like I needed to contribute. And so you were on my list. And it was my first call of the day. I finally was like, all right, I'm going to do it. So my first call of the day, I called it to you. And I didn't know this, but Xero was running a webinar for accounting partners at the time. And so I call, I'm like, and our whole script was like kind of making it sound like we were involved with Xero in some way, so people would like not hang up on us. And so you're like, are you calling from Xero? And I said, oh, yeah, kind of, but they're not. You're like, Xero's running a webinar right now for me. It's like about this roadshow. And like, why are you calling to interrupt the webinar to talk about the roadshow when the webinar is about the roadshow? And I was like, this is not on my script. So then I had to hang up very quickly. And I didn't do any more calls for the day.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex.
No, you shouldn't be, because I was like, I think it was a valuable lesson about sales, which is you should always do your research.
On what?
Like, I was stupid enough to call you during the webinar.
During the webiner. Well,
it was public. It was a public webinar because I got invited to it. So I was the idiot who called.
Well, I'll tell you a story from that time, that era, that involved Tanda. I don't think it involved you. I think it was someone else, one of your colleagues. So I've been married 30 years, so I'm a very, very, very married person. And I went up to the Tanda table and said, what do you do? And they pulled up their screen and they said, it's like a dating app and you swipe right. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I left clueless.
Yeah, I think our pitch has gotten a lot better.
Yes, I think it has. That was a long time ago. And I was just like going, oh, okay. So yes, it absolutely has, and your team are always a delight. But that was a funny
maybe
moment.
Not so much back there
For a very married woman. So thank you again. How can our listeners get in contact with you, Alex?
If you want to email me, it's alex@tanda.co. And if you are interested in Tanda Payroll, if you Google Tanda Payroll, you'll have to scroll past the ads that all of our competitors have put up, and eventually you'll find the actual Tanda Payroll by us. It's really good. Definitely check it out. And if you do try it out, please send me an email and let me know what you think.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Alex, for joining us today.
Thanks
really appreciate it. I hope you liked listening to that interview with Alex Ghiculescu, co-founder of both Tanda and Workforce.com. As I went to record my intro and outro, I realised I didn't actually know how to pronounce Alex's last name. So I went and listened to another podcast he recorded with Jason Andrews, fellow Brisbane accountant, and he simply called him Alex G. so he didn't give me any clues on how to pronounce it either. So hopefully I did pronounce it correctly. I did a lot of research to try and figure that one out, which would have been better if I'd just asked you when I spoke with you, Alex, but hopefully I almost got it. So you can read the show notes of this podcast at my blog, heathersmithsmallbusiness.com blog. And from here, I suggest you... From here, I suggest you join the Xero Mastermind group on Facebook for advanced conversations around the ecosystem. Subscribe to the Informative Accounting Apps newsletter, which gives you a great overview of the ecosystem space. You can find that at heathersmithau.com. And I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And of course, subscribe to the Cloud Stories podcast. And if you like this episode, leave a 5-star review to help others find it. Thank you so much.